My name is Edward, and I was born into a life most people only dream about. Some would say I had a silver spoon in my mouth, but honestly, it felt more like I was handed a loaded weapon from the start. My father wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful. He ran the most feared crime syndicate in the city, and with that came influence, money, and absolute control. Growing up, I never heard the word no. If I wanted something, it was mine, cars, cash, attention. People didn't respect me for who I was, they feared who I belonged to. My father's name wrapped around me like armor, untouchable and absolute. But that wasn't enough for me. I didn't want to live in his shadow, I wanted my own reputation, my own dominance. So I pushed boundaries. I picked fights just to prove I could win. I drove like the streets belonged to me. I partied like consequences didn't exist. And every time something went wrong, it vanished cleaned up by money, influence, or fear. It was thrilling and completely hollow. Deep down, I knew I was abusing the power I'd been given, but I didn't care. I was young,
Rich.
untouchable. At least, that's what I believed.
Until that night.
I was speeding through the city in my newest sports car, the engine roaring like it matched my pulse. Lights streaked past me in blurs of neon and gold. I was drunk not just from alcohol, but from the rush, the power, the illusion that nothing could touch me. Then it happened. A sharp turn. Too sudden. Too fast. I lost control. Tires screamed. Glass shattered. The world spun into chaos, and then nothing. Darkness swallowed everything. When I woke up, the world had changed. The sleek interior of my car was gone. In its place, cracked walls, peeling paint, a dim, suffocating room that smelled of neglect. A cheap, cramped apartment. Nothing like the life I knew. Panic surged through me as I tried to move, and something felt wrong. Too light. Too different. My breath caught as I looked down. Instead of the familiar shape of my body, there were curves. Soft, unmistakable curves hidden beneath a loose gray tank top. My hands trembled as they moved to my chest only to freeze. Softness.
Real.
Undeniable. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't possible. And yet, it was real. I wasn't in my body anymore. I was in someone else's. No, not just someone else, a woman. My heart pounded as I scrambled to my feet, panic clawing its way at my chest. I stumbled across the room until I found a mirror. And when I looked into it, everything inside me shattered. A stranger stared back. Long red hair framed a face that felt hauntingly familiar, yet completely wrong.
Softer.
Delicate. The sharp edges I knew were gone, replaced by features I didn't recognize but somehow belonged to me. This isn't real, I whispered, my voice trembling higher, lighter. But the cold air, the cracked walls, the smell of that tiny, lifeless apartment, none of it felt like a dream. This was real. Too real. My breathing turned shallow as I searched the room for answers, my eyes darting wildly until they landed on a small, rickety table. A single piece of paper rested on it. I grabbed it, and the moment I saw the handwriting, my stomach dropped. My mother's. Dear Edward. My vision blurred as I read, each word hitting harder than the last. They were tired of me, tired of my arrogance, my recklessness, my belief that I was untouchable.
So they decided to change me.
Not metaphorically.
Literally.
My transformation, this body, this life, was their doing.
Permanent.
Irreversible. A punishment. A lesson. They had stripped me of everything, my identity, my power, my name, and left me here. Alone. In the middle of a city that no longer belonged to me. But there was one final line that cut deeper than all the rest. I could come back, but not as Edward. Only as their daughter. Emily. The paper slipped from my hands. Emily. The name echoed in my mind, unfamiliar yet impossible to ignore. I sank onto the worn-out couch, my body, this body feeling, fragile, exposed. My fingers trembled as they traced my new face.
Smooth skin.
High cheekbones.
Softer lines.
Everything I once was gone. And in its place, someone I didn't understand. For the first time in my life, I felt powerless. Not the kind of powerlessness I used to mock, but real, suffocating vulnerability. The kind I had forced others to feel without a second thought. The note hadn't just explained my situation. It had exposed me. Every reckless decision. Every selfish act. Every moment I thought I was above everyone else, it all came crashing down at once. This wasn't just punishment. It was a mirror. And I hated what it showed me. But there was no escaping it now. No money. No name. No protection. Just me and this new life. Emily's life. As dawn crept through the cracked window, painting the room in pale gold, something inside me shifted. The panic didn't disappear, but beneath it, something else began to form. Reality. I didn't have a choice anymore. If I wanted to survive, if I ever wanted a chance to go back, I had to change. Not pretend. Not manipulate. Actually change. Slowly, I stood up and walked toward the door. My hand hovered over the handle as doubt flooded in. Everything outside was unknown now. The world that once bent to my will wouldn't even recognize me. Taking a deep breath, I stepped outside. The city was alive, loud, crowded, indifferent. People rushed past me, without a second glance. No fear. No respect. No recognition. For the first time in my life, I was invisible. My heels clicked softly against the pavement, each step uncertain, awkward, like I was learning how to exist all over again. Every movement felt. Every glance felt exposing. And yet, strangely, safe. No one knew who I was. No one knew who I had been. And as I walked deeper into the crowd, one thought echoed louder than all the rest. Edward was gone. Now, I had to figure out who Emily really was. The city felt like a maze I no longer understood. Every street I crossed, every corner I turned, carried a strange mix of familiarity and distance, as if I were walking through memories that didn't belong to me anymore. Landmarks from my old life stood tall and unchanged, yet they felt unreachable, like they were part of someone else's story. Edward's story, not mine. As I moved through the crowded streets, the reality of my situation settled deeper into my bones. People looked at me differently now. Some glanced with curiosity, others with quiet judgment. A few didn't bother hiding their intentions. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was exposed. And vulnerable. The confidence I once wore like armor had vanished, replaced by something fragile, something I had never experienced before. Fear. At one point, an elderly woman noticed me lingering on a corner, clearly lost. She approached gently, her voice kind, her eyes filled with concern as she offered directions. I thanked her, my voice softer than I remembered it ever being. Later, that small moment of kindness was shattered. A group of loud, careless boys passed by, their laughter sharp and mocking. Their words followed me like knives, each insult cutting deeper than it should have. Not because of what they said, but because I finally understood what it felt like to be on the receiving end. Once people lowered their voices when I walked by. Now they raised them. Every step became heavier. Hunger clawed at me, but pride held me back from asking for help. I pushed forward, driven by something stubborn, something that refused to let me collapse. The journey wasn't just physical anymore. It was personal, painful, necessary. As the hours passed, exhaustion blurred my thoughts, but something else began to grow beneath it, a quiet determination. Not the reckless, arrogant kind I once had, but something steadier, something real. Then, as the sun dipped lower, I saw it. The distant outline of my family's estate. It stood like a monument on the horizon, familiar, powerful, and yet intimidating in a way it had never been before. Relief washed over me.
But it didn't last.
Because deep down, I knew something had changed. Reaching those gates wouldn't mean going back. Not really. This wasn't the end of my journey. It was just the beginning. The city had transformed me more than I realized. What once felt like a playground for my excesses had become a mirror reflecting truths I had spent years avoiding. Every interaction, every passing face, revealed something new. People didn't see Edward anymore. They saw Emily, and they treated me accordingly. Some with kindness, some with indifference, some with cruelty. But all of it was honest. A street vendor I would have ignored in my past life noticed me lingering nearby. Without a word, he handed me a sandwich and smiled, simple, genuine. No fear, no expectation, just kindness. I hesitated before accepting it, something in my chest tightening. That small act meant more than anything money had ever bought me. Further along, music caught my attention. A group of street performers danced freely, their energy contagious, their laughter unfiltered. One of them noticed me watching, hesitant, uncertain, and reached out a hand. For a moment, I froze. Old instincts told me to walk away. But something else, something new, made me stay. I took her hand. And for the first time since everything changed, I let go. As I moved with them, awkward at first, then freer with each second, I felt something unfamiliar rise within me. Not power, not control. Freedom. It was fleeting, fragile but real. And in that moment, surrounded by strangers who didn't care who I used to be, I felt something I had never truly known before. Belonging. By the time I reached the outskirts of my family's estate, I wasn't the same person who had woken up in that apartment. And I definitely wasn't Edward anymore. This journey through the city hadn't just brought me closer to home. It had forced me to confront what home really meant. Not wealth, not power, not fear, but identity, understanding, acceptance. As I stood there, staring at the gates that once symbolized everything I thought I needed, a quiet realization settled over me. This wasn't about going back. It was about moving forward, becoming someone new, becoming Emily. Each step I took felt uncertain, yet purposeful. Emily's footsteps, my footsteps, were no longer drifting aimlessly. They were carving something new, a path where redemption wasn't just a distant idea, but something real, something I could almost reach. As I approached the gates of what had once been my fortress, my empire, my heart pounded violently in my chest. The towering walls loomed ahead, just as imposing as I remembered. But they didn't feel like protection anymore. They felt like judgment. For the first time in my life, I hesitated at my own home. Was I even worthy of stepping inside? Because this time, the challenge wasn't about power or control. It was about facing him, my father, the man whose shadow had defined my entire existence. The gates groaned as they slowly opened, the sound echoing like a warning, like a signal that something irreversible had begun. I stepped forward, and the past came rushing back. Memories hit me all at once: laughter, arrogance, reckless nights, victories built on fear, each one sharper than the last. But before I could take another step, a figure emerged from the shadows.
Marco.
My father's enforcer. A man feared almost as much as the empire itself. He stepped into the dim light, his presence cold and unyielding, eyes scanning me with open disdain. Emily, he sneered, my new name dripping with mockery. You think you can just walk back in here? After everything? His words struck harder than any blow, because he wasn't wrong. That world, his world, didn't forgive weakness. And right now, that's exactly what I looked like. I'm not here to walk back in, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm here to face what I've done and prove I can be better. For a moment, silence. Then Marco laughed, a harsh, cutting sound. Change, he repeated. You think you can just change and everything resets? His eyes darkened. You have no idea what's been happening since you disappeared. Something in his tone shifted. This wasn't just about me anymore. Something had gone wrong. The empire wasn't stable. And for the first time, that realization didn't excite me. It terrified me, because the chaos I once thrived in now felt dangerous in a completely different way. Standing there, facing Marco, I understood something clearly. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a choice. I could fall back into who I used to be, fight, dominate, force my way back in.
Or
I could stand my ground differently, not with power, but with purpose. I know I can't erase the past, I said quietly, meeting his gaze. But I'm not that person anymore. The words felt foreign, but also true. The tension between us tightened, stretching thin like it could snap at any second.
Then
Marco stepped back, not fully yielding, but not attacking either. His expression didn't soften, but something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, reluctance, maybe even curiosity. Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me standing there,
Alive.
and shaken. Crossing the threshold of the estate felt surreal. Everything was the same and yet completely different. The grand hall stretched before me, elegant and imposing, but now it felt colder, quieter.
Like it was watching me.
Judging me. Every step echoed louder than it should have. This place used to belong to me. Now, I felt like a stranger inside it. Then I heard footsteps.
Soft.
Measured. I turned and saw her. My mother. She stood at the end of the hallway, her presence calm, yet commanding as always. But her eyes changed the moment they landed on me. They softened. Not with pity, but with something deeper. Understanding. She studied me in silence, taking in every detail, not just how I looked, but who I had become. And for the first time, since this began, I didn't feel judged. I felt seen. The moment felt suspended in time. No words were spoken at first, just silence, heavy, fragile, filled with everything we hadn't said for years.
Regret. Hope.
Distance. And something new, something tentative, slowly trying to connect us again. Emily, my mother finally said. Her voice carried both sorrow and relief, as if she had been waiting for this moment, but never truly believed it would come. I see you've come back to us, but not just in body. Her words were quiet, yet they cut deeper than anything else I had heard. Because she was right. I hadn't just changed on the outside. Everything inside me had shifted. The arrogance, the certainty, the illusion of control, it had all been stripped away. What remained was something raw, something real, something I was still learning to understand. Then I felt it. A presence behind me. Heavy. Unmistakable. My father. He hadn't made a sound, yet the entire room seemed to bend around him, just like it always had. For so long, he had been unshakable in my eyes, an immovable force of authority and expectation.
But now,
he looked different. Older. Not weaker, but human. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I didn't see just judgment or power. I saw hesitation. And something that looked dangerously close to regret. The space between us felt uncertain, as if the rules that once defined our relationship no longer applied. For once, neither of us knew who held the power, or if it even mattered anymore. I took a slow breath. I didn't come back to take my old place, I said, my voice steady, grounded in everything I had endured. I came back to start something new. They said nothing, but they listened. And that was enough. I've seen things, felt things I never could have understood before. I continued.
Fear.
Helplessness. Kindness from people I would have ignored, or worse. The words came easier now.
Honest.
Unfiltered. I used to think strength meant control, power over others, being untouchable. I paused, shaking my head slightly. But that wasn't strength. That was ignorance. My father's gaze didn't leave mine. And now, he asked quietly. I swallowed, then answered. Now I understand that real strength is knowing when you're not in control. It's respecting others, listening, changing even when it hurts. Silence followed again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. My parents exchanged a glance, something unspoken passing between them. Their expressions weren't simple anymore. There was no instant acceptance, no dramatic forgiveness. Just something real.
Complicated.
Human. We weren't fixed. We weren't whole.
Not yet.
In some ways, we were strangers. In others, we were finally seeing each other clearly for the first time. And maybe that was enough. As I stood there, in the place that once defined everything I thought I was, a quiet realization settled over me. This wasn't the end of my transformation. It was the beginning, not just for me, but for all of us. The life I had lived as Edward was built on legacy, expectation, and control. The life ahead as Emily would be built on something entirely different.
Growth.
Understanding. Empathy. For the first time, I wasn't chasing power. I was searching for truth, for identity, for something real. And as uncertain as that path was, I was finally ready to walk it.